Chapter 5. The Primal Fall. Zero sat in my study and began to talk. He spoke of the mystery of the primal fall of man, that initial fall from grace of spiritual beings, but he stressed that in no circumstance could he enable me to witness any reconstruction of that epoch-making occurrence. There is a great mystery here which you can only have in parable form, he explained. Were I to try and show you the reality, you would find yourself floundering in a sea of conjecture concerning that which is infinite and not infinite. I could give you a little idea of the environment, the purpose, and the nature of these pristine beings. As I have tried to show you, evil is a great lie, manifested by the turning away from the light towards the darkness that exists only in mind, not in reality. Were there no minds in creative existence, there could be no evil. Thus, to God, evil is a lie, illusory and unreal. To man it is finite and real as long as his mind accepts it, and in his manifested life it can be terribly harmful and degrading. But such is the depth of man's fall that the road back from the darkness into the light is long and arduous, for where there is darkness the path cannot clearly be seen. In order that there might be experience, there had to be a shadow against which the light might be perceived, the imperfection that would show perfection as it really is. For in perfection there can be no experience. You could not perceive your sunlight were there no shadows, no daylight unless there were specks of dust in your atmosphere. Let us then say that in the dim past, before time was, this pristine race expressed too strongly their creative urge and sought too eagerly to obtain knowledge which they were not able to control. Thus, through eons of time, they became introspective rather than expansive, until there came a time when self-will overshadowed their inherent innocence, and they fell out of the sight of God. That is the parable. You must be content with that. But the dreary history of man is not that of an experiment that failed. Never think that. As a bird in flight stoops to drink of the water, so did man stoop too swiftly to drink of the water of experience. You are all part of one whole. Without the inclusion of the least reputable of human beings, heaven would be incomplete. Can you accept that? I thought for a while before I answered. Then I asked, but why could we not have been told all this before? Nothing has ever been denied or hidden from you. The sun is always shining, though at times in your winter you feel that it has gone from you forever. You see only clouds. The truth has always been available to man, but for his own good. When he was in the dark ages of experience, it was obscured in myth and symbol that he might not use it out of his own destruction. Your books of Genesis and Revelation are examples. When you are ready to comprehend their meaning, you will find understanding of them. But now man's spiritual nature is in the ascendant through the terrible suffering of the past 50 years. A great deal has been happening beyond the scenes of this Renaissance. Think how the so-called backward countries of your world have increased in intelligent understanding through the last decade or so. It is out of all the knowledge of what they were. You will say that it is because of the triumph of science. Well, yes, indeed. But who allowed that scientific knowledge to percolate throughout into the world? You know that cosmic rays are constantly pouring forth into your world. Does not Revelation say, I will pour forth my spirit upon all flesh? And you know what the promised result would be. Intense disturbance, great fear and insecurity, seemingly great loss, but in reality great gain. That is your situation today. The light is penetrating into the darkness in men's mind and driving it out in expression so that it might be transmuted and destroyed. It had to be. God is indeed intervening in the affairs of man, fulfilling the work begun by his manifestation in the Son of Man 2,000 years ago. Yet the conflicts in your world are as nothing to those in the realm contiguous to it. Those dark realms where you send your evil doers in terrible procession. You are sadly mistaken if you imagine that death puts paid to a life of selfish and evil deeds. Yet the soul of the most intransigent rogue is as precious to the Father as any other. And most of your upheavals are but reflections of greater ones occurring in the unseen realms of darkness, where the light has such terrible effects. But it all seems unjust, I burst out. So many innocent people having to suffer with the guilty. Zero's thought for a moment before he replied. I know there are some who think that those who suffer are paying for the misdeeds of a former life. Well, to some extent that is true, but you would be greatly mistaken if you were complacent about it. The whole concept is incomprehensible as long as you regard the person as an individual existing alone. Only when you ponder over the universality of mankind, regarding yourself as well as all others as having no separate existence, no possibility of living by yourself, can you begin to find justice in what seems to be so unjust. If you sin, you drag the whole of humanity down with you. If you achieve a spiritual triumph, you uplift the whole of humanity by that same extent. God cannot save you by yourself. He can only save the whole of humanity with not one missing. And suffering is inseparable from redemption. Moreover, there is a law of compensation by which those who give themselves into the arms of remedial suffering achieve a greatness not obtainable by any comparable means. There can be no injustice in perfection. And the Father is perfection. Do not lose heart. All is in perfect order. You can only delay the ultimate consummation in time, not in eternity. And God's patience is surely not endless. So you must not regard yourself as pawns in a titanic game, or the victims of a blind evolutionary process. The end is sure and benign in the eyes of the Heavenly Father, who could not possibly connive at chaos without meaning. Try and forget the present and take the long view I have tried to show you, the rescue of the whole of humanity rather than a select few. Many, many thousands are working behind the scenes in your world of spirit around you, working against the defiance of mankind exercised through its free will. But with all the power of omnipotence behind them, take comfort from that thought. It is this long, slow climb back to nobility of mind that has puzzled your anthropologists and made it difficult for them to see beyond the physical. Those who took part in that spiritual rebellion were so driven out of the sight of God that they could no longer live in terms of spirit, and were thrown back upon their own inadequate resources. They fell into darkness and were given the supreme mercy of forgetfulness in the human incarnation, albeit the only bodies which could sustain them were of necessity crude and unintelligent. These were the indigenous inhabitants of the earth, brute men whom your Genesis described poetically as the daughters of men, while to the lovely beings in the garden beautiful who descended to their aid, it gives the name sons of God. Thus there were two races upon the earth at the same time, one ascending out of the pit of darkness on a redemptive, and the other descending upon the evolutionary ark, a spiritual R, and of offering themselves for the task of helping their fallen brethren. Both races belong to the spiritual conception which you call man. The fallen race, which postulated a fallen world, were not evolved from the animal kingdom as some assert. The four kingdoms are linked in spiritual reality, but not in physical expression. They did not evolve out of each other on the earth. To evolve a human being through association with an animal would be a poisonous mating and against nature law, as I shall try and show you in due course. Once again the time had come for Zaros to depart, always a moment of sadness for me, for I had come to love this great soul who was doing so much to illumine my understanding of spiritual matters. There was a bond between us that made it easy for him to express meaning to me that might otherwise have been obscure. With that smile of intimate sincerity that endeared him to me, he began to fade away from my sight, back to that wonderful realm where he had his real being.